I'm Rose Pasquarello Beauchamp. I am a choreographer, artist, dancer, and activist. I currently work at the University of Rochester in the program of Dance and Movement, and I'm the artistic director of electricGrit Dance and co-founder of Artist Coalition for Change. I received a grant from NYState Dance Force, the Western NY Choreographers Initiative, and the grant is for exploration in the studio. So I have funding to support dancers to work through the process and really spend time on the process rather than focusing on product. We've really started to re-envision what is it like to dance in the time of COVID and how can we continue forward in the process while also keeping in mind all the things that are necessary to protect ourselves. So for a long time, I've been really interested in somatics as it relates to social justice and what that is in the body. All of my dancers identify as white dancers, and so we're in a particularly specific instance in which we're talking about white privilege, racial identity, what our responsibilities are, and what we need to do to start to unpack this. I was really called to use somatics as a way to start to unpack racial identities within my community and within this group of dancers. And so the project has really evolved into somatics to creation. How do we go from processing in our bodies some of this stored trauma and history around racial identities and move it into creation? How do we create from a place of vulnerability? And how do we do that outside at 6 feet apart? And so it's been a really interesting kind of journey.
I am really interested in this idea that this dialogue can land on our bodies, in our bodies, and it's not just an intellectual understanding. So that feels really potent to me, and it makes tons of sense to me. But it's very new, so I'm still like trying to become more aware of that, you know? And it feels very different than just having a cerebral discussion about it, you know, trying to sense it in the body. Yeah.
I'm Rose's mentor. The mentor's role for the whole grant in the as written on paper is to come to several rehearsals and just observe and then challenge the choreographer to think in new ways and expand their process in new ways. And also to give feedback on what's being made. They had one rehearsal, I was not there for it, but I heard about it afterwards. That was actually, they were exploring microaggressions. And because of this idea of how do we create somatic experiences, Rose actually used some theater games to actually have them be aggressive towards each other. And so apparently, again, I wasn't there, but I did also hear from some of the dancers as well, that at first it was actually really not comfortable, very uncomfortable. And I heard that from Rose too when she was telling me about it, but they were able to, after doing the uncomfortable part, then also do some other activities that created hope and community. So kind of take the hard stuff and turn it around into something good. I think actually that was a good time to be on an outside and not have even been there, in order to listen to it and say, no, actually you all did really important work there. And listening to Rose describe it, I told her that it was actually, and she kind of intuitively made it happen, like it didn't go as she planned during the rehearsal, and she intuitively realized she needed to have this turnaround at the end. And I told her that that's actually something that I've also figured out in my peace building pedagogy and have done, not specifically with whiteness, but with other kind of negative emotions, that you have to go into the emotion deeply and somatically and then have structured ways to bring yourself out to the opposite. And so like she kind of figured that out spontaneously or improvisationally. And so I think it was really helpful for me to then say, no, you're really onto something there. Keep going with it, even though it's hard, even though the rehearsal might have been uncomfortable, like that was really good work.
We're talking about microaggressions a lot today, and we're doing a lot of talking to each other, but also she's asking us to tune into sensation and what are we experiencing in our physical body. And so I'm noticing a lot of my shoulders coming in, and even my eyes start to squint. Like, I don't even want to look out of my eyes. My head hurts. A general sense of ickiness is coming up, and that's really hard to sit with that ickiness. And how lucky am I that I don't normally have to sit with ickiness like this most days, pretty much every day of my life. It's incredible to think about how the physical body responds to everything and how it's all so connected. So I guess I'm grateful that Rose is giving us this opportunity to tune into our physical responses to these things. Yeah.
Fairly early on, maybe the second or third day, I'm thinking, she had us journal. She kind of had us close our eyes and just feel in our bodies where it resonated with us to be thinking about race or racism. And that was really interesting. That was something I would never really considered or tuned into. And I'm sure it probably changes based on the day and your environment, and did you just have a really hard conversation about race, or all of a sudden the question just popped into your mind, So I think it could lead to very different results each time that you did it, which could also be really interesting. But that was really fascinating. I found a lot of just depth going in and feeling where that lay in my body and being really descriptive about it, because then we had to write it down afterwards. We never shared it. We never articulated it verbally to one another, but just the act of really noticing and then trying to describe it. I was able to get to a lot of detail in writing about it afterward. That was a very interesting prompt.
This particular rehearsal has felt the most raw as compared to the other ones, because I think it brings in a lot of the reality of what we have lived through and what we have done, or what I have done to other people. It brings it to the surface versus just feeling like, oh, I've never done that. I've never aggressed someone. I've never racially profiled someone, like blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh no, like I have. And like coming to terms with that and then like moving through it. So, yeah. And I think that's why I've been drawn to work with Rose so much, is because it's, all of her processes tend to be very healing, because it dives into different parts of like your body, physically, your psyche, like your emotional well-being, your mental well-being. Like it's a very like three-dimensional process versus just placing movement on bodies.
This is like our last rehearsal today. But I don't think this is the end of this. I think that this will develop, but in a way that's not the normal way that a piece of choreography would develop. Because I don't think it's really about choreography in some ways. It's more about like how we grow as a tiny community, this group of 7 people. At the same time, like in the pursuit of like somatic understanding, and also in the pursuit of art making, right? And again, because this doesn't have a culminating performance right now, I think at one point there will be a way to share it. Maybe this is one way. And so that interests me, because I think performance isn't everything in dance. I mean, performance is great, but like there's so many other aspects of dance and how it fits into like its own role in the world and in like people's lives. So like that part of it's really interesting to me, like that we're working together, but is it so that we can create something, or is it so that we can become better people, communicate better, forgive, you know, like love more widely? Like I think there's so many good things that can come out of this process that have nothing to do with the dance. And that's cool.